Welcome to our Understanding Temperament digital resource. We're going to be looking at what temperament is and what makes all kids different. My name's Sam, I'm the Clinical Director here at Standing in the Gap. For those that you've not met us before, Standing in the Gap is what we call an early intervention mental health charity. So we help preschool and primary age children manage fear, anxiety, anger and grief, and we do a lot of work around managing change. We've had some funding from the Coronavirus Community Support Fund, which is distributed by the National Lottery Community Fund, and this has enabled us to make this digital resource and several other across our website. So what we want to do is look at what makes each child different and why what works for one child doesn't necessarily work for another. Standing in the Gap, we believe that the more parents, carers and teachers understand our children, the better we can help them manage big emotions and cope with difficult situations. So let's have a look at what we mean by temperament. Your child's temperament influences how they think, behave and react to situations. Temperament's the building blocks of personality and looks at your child's behavioural style. So as adults we can often do personality tests and we get information about how introvert, extrovert, how we think, we feel, all of those issues. We can't do those with children because their brains aren't fully developed to between 25 and 30 years. So it's a long-term process that they're going through. However, we can look at their temperament. There's quite a difference in opinion from researchers on whether temperaments you're born with them or whether you develop them in response to genetic and environmental factors. But what everybody's agreed is that there is a range of different styles. Psychiatrists have split this into three groups. The first one is easy, which accounts for about 40% of children. These are the children that are laid back, easy, regular rhythms, no problem. These are the ones that parents go, I'm doing okay at parenting, this isn't too bad. So that's about 40% of children are classed as easy temperament. 10% get classed as difficult. And these are the ones that struggle to settle, struggle to potty train, struggle to separate. And these are often the kids that parents go, oh, I'm a terrible parent, I can't do this is really hard. Whereas often it's not always about parenting style, it's about your child's temperament. So that's about 10% or 1 in 10 children. The next category is honestly called slow to warm up, which does sound a little bit rude, but what it means is that it's the type of child who will stand on the edge of a group, who will look in and see what's going on, whereas your difficult temperament child will make their upset known quite easily. A slow to warm up child can often be described as shy, so they will show upset but often a lot quieter in a different manner, and that's about 15% of children. So you might be sitting there thinking, got it nailed, I know which I've got, I've definitely got a easy, difficult, slow to warm up. Or you might be thinking, I'm not entirely sure where they fit. But if you add those up, that only comes to 65%. So we know that the other 35% are very much a combination. And what's very useful to think about is actually the temperament traits, which we're going to go on and consider. So let's have a look at the 9 temperament traits, and these help us understand our children better. There is a downloadable worksheet off the website, so please do download it and go through and score your child. There isn't any right or wrong answers, but what it does do is it helps us understand how our children think, behave and react, and how we can help them when they find things difficult. The first temperament trait we want to look at is activity level, and this relates to your child's idle speed, or how active they generally are. This is scored between 1 and 10, 1 being low, 10 being high. If you've got a child who is quite a low idle speed, they don't like doing things, they're quite happy to be sedentary. If you've got a high idle speed, these are the ones that need to run around, be about, get outside, do different things. You'll have a good idea of what your children are. But also it's worth thinking about, for their general activity speed, how that's going to work with being at school, doing activities and various other different things. Children with a high activity, idle speed, struggle to sit still in lessons too much. They're the ones that on wet play days, they are itchy and movie and want to get around and got ants in their pants and really struggle. Your low activity ones are the ones that you struggle to get out and get moving. The recommendations for children is that they should have around an hour's activity each day, irrespective of what their idle speed. So it's worth encouraging regular activity. You might need some creativity on what you class as physical activity, and it can be anything. Dancing, sport, online activities, using consoles, watching YouTube videos. There's lots of options available, but trying to keep your child generally active is quite useful. But understanding when they struggle is also helpful when you're looking at managing change and getting them to work within the school environments. The next trait we want to look at is distractibility. And this looks at how much attention your child pays to something they're not particularly interested in. So how sidetracked can they become? We rate this distractibility on a 1 to 10. 1 being hard to distract, 10 being easy to distract. Very distractible is useful with toddlers when they're getting upset or miserable or don't want to do things. Look, there's a bird, there's a plane. Oh, what's that? Look out the window can work brilliantly. It's not so great to have a very distractible child if they're trying to do their homework or they're not particularly engaged with it. So knowing how distractible your child is can be quite useful. How much clutter do they need around their desk if they're working? How much encouragement do they need? How much distraction can you use if they're not doing so well? Can you break things into small chunks and give regular encouragement for bigger pieces of work? So yeah, distractibility is an interesting option. The next trait is intensity, and this looks at the level of response you get from your child, and it can be positive or negative. Is your child someone who shows pleasure or upset strongly and dramatically, or much more quietly? This is rated again on a response of 1 to 10, 1 being low, people not sure what's going on with them, 10 being very high, everybody knows their feelings. You'll have a good idea of where your child flows within those, and again, none of it's right or wrong. But children that express their feelings very loudly and very descriptively and very dramatically are often easy to work out when they're upset, when they're cross, when they're tired. Children on the 1, 2s and 3s are often much more difficult to unpick. Bit like the slow to warm up children, they often have big feelings, they just don't show them in a massively intense way. So understanding your child's level of intensity, which can change as they grow up, is really helpful in helping them unpick how big some of the feelings are. Another temperament trait we're going to consider is regularity. And this looks at how predictable your child is with their biological functions, like appetite and sleep. Do they get hungry and tired at predictable times, or are they totally unpredictable? So again, you can rate your child's regularity, with 1 being very regular and 10 being totally irregular. Now, my friends and family laugh at me and say I am a very regular person. I need to eat regularly or I get very grumpy. Now, if your child's like me, having a long period between food can make you quite grumpy. So particularly for secondary school, which is starting often at 8:30 in the morning and you have to get there, and very often they don't have lunch breaks till around 1 o'clock, can mean a long time if your child's used to eating regularly. So it's worth considering if you need those regular snacks, have a snack at break time, have different things. Also, if your child's really regular, they do need to be in bed at regular times, otherwise they'll get tired and grumpy. On the other end, if your child is completely irregular, you need to remember that when was the last time we ate? When was the last time you did this? Because they're not going to make the same demands of I'm hungry, I want this. It enables the big people sometimes have to do that thinking and add in that structure. Otherwise they could go doing more exciting things or playing or everything else and not necessarily want to stop for a drink, a snack, or actually really struggle with that I need to stop and go to bed. Another trait is sensory threshold, and that's how sensitive is your child to physical stimuli. So that can be sound, taste, touch, or temperature. So does your child startle at loud noises? Is it something they really don't like? Are they a picky eater? Is it certain textures they don't want? Or will they eat anything? How do they respond to the feel of clothing? One of my children is very fussy on, if I don't like the feel of it, I'm not wearing it. Which is fine, But it's worth knowing, because over time we've then gone, unless they come and try things on, I'm not buying clothing. Also, what's the sensory threshold? How would you rate them? 1 is low, I'll do anything, eat anything, not fussed. 10 is high. Temperature's an interesting one. How responsive are they to temperature? How aware are they? Often, if you walk to school and it's cold and you've got lots of layers on, and then you're going into a classroom, sometimes if you're not very aware of your temperature changes, you can get very, very hot and very sweaty. And often it will enable teachers, teaching assistants, people to say, oh, is it worth taking your jumper off? Do you want to consider that? And again, you may find that your child doesn't pick up if they're particularly cold. They can run around outside and be completely unimpacted on whether they're getting cold. So again, knowing what the sensory thresholds are for your child can be really helpful to help them not end up getting too cold and too miserable, or not choosing your battles. If they're a very picky eater, work with them, try and expand that, but some battles you don't want to constantly come against the same thing, because that's something they struggle with. Another temperament trait is approach and withdrawal, and this looks at how your child responds to new situations and strangers. Do they approach them readily, or are they a little bit hesitant and very worried about new situations? So how would you rate them on a scale, again, 1 to 10? 1 being eager and enthusiastic, will tell them anything, talk to anybody, or 10 being very hesitant and resistant. Again, none of these are right or wrong, but understanding where your child fits just really enables you to help them. If you've got a really hesitant child who struggles to talk to new people, actually doing some things with them to help them can be really useful. In some of our talks, we talk about conversation hooks, which are just ways of starting conversations and sharing information. Who are you? What's your name? Which school do you go to? Obviously, you need to do these in safe environments, but children that are going into new classes or meeting new people, it can be useful if they're very hesitant that you've done some practice with them. Talking to their granny, talking to somebody else, running through tell us something exciting about you, can really give your child confidence when they start a new school or go to a new club, or like with COVID, when they go back to something but haven't seen people for a long time. How do they pick those relationships up? A lot of children don't struggle, but if your child is very hesitant, being able to think about, oh yes, I could ask this, or I could ask that, I could do this, can be really helpful. Another thing to consider if you've got a very hesitant child is around putting a framework with them on who do they go to if they're concerned, who can they ask for help, and it might be that it's 1 or 2 key people. If you're struggling at Brownies, who do you speak to? If there's a problem at school or at preschool, what's my key person? Who can I talk to? Who do I get on with? And if you help them think through some of those, it enables them to go, while I feel a bit shy and I feel a bit difficult, I do know what to do, and that can be really helpful. So again, approach withdrawal is a useful temperament trait to have a look at and be aware of for your child. Adaptability is a further temperament trait we need to look at, and this relates to how well your child adapts to transitions and changes. Can they cope from moving from one activity to another, or are they happy to change activity, or does it take forever and they get very uncomfortable in new situations? Again, there is no right or wrong, but if we can rate your child's adaptability between 1 being low and 10 being high, it probably gives us a good idea of how much support they're going to need. Within primary school, it's not too difficult because very often you're staying in the same space and things happen within that. And a lot of the time they use timers and countdowns and lots of information, which can help your child get used to that transitions and improve their adaptability. If your child's very fixed on them not being very adaptable, often moving to secondary school can be quite a difficult challenge. You change classrooms, you have different teachers, you have different people to get to know. Again, knowing how well your child adapts to change can be really useful. We do have a separate video that we're making around managing change, and particularly around COVID-19, this has been an issue. What we were used to is completely different, and I think within the whole situation, not knowing what the next bit's going to look like has been hard. So if your child has low adaptability, they're going to struggle with, we're not quite sure what it's going to look like, we're not sure about this, and the change factor that's going on. But again, do have a look at our other resource around managing change, because we can give you a very clear framework within that you can use the principles of with your child. Persistence is another temperament trait. It's useful to know, and this looks at the length of time your child's going to spend on an activity. Do they sit and work really hard at a puzzle? Can they wait to have their needs met? And how strongly do they respond if they're being interrupted? You can rate your child's persistence between 1 being quite low and 10 being quite high. Will they sit and do things? This is useful for fine detailed work and a complicated piece of homework. It can be really hard if their persistence is really low. Again, a lot of these change and develop, and it's about you understanding your child, so being able to help them manage what's coming along. The final temperament trait we want to consider is mood, and this is how your child reacts to the world. Is it positive? Is it negative? Are they a glass half full or a glass half empty? Are they generally in quite a happy mood and quite jolly, or are they a little bit more serious? So again, we're looking at a 1 to 10. How would you rate your child? 1 being negative, 10 being positive. Understanding this can be really helpful. If you have a child that's quite negative and they view things quite negatively, you weigh up the information they're giving you about how they feel about the world. If you've got a really positive child who is then suddenly very negative, that would indicate a real shift and potentially that something is a problem. But again, understanding how your child works really enables us as parents, carers and teachers to work out how to interact with them, how to help them, and how to enable them to manage big and sometimes complex feelings. So to summarise, we've looked at the 3 types of temperament, the main types, although there's a lot of variety in that, and we've worked our way through and considered the 9 temperament traits. As I said, do download the worksheet, do have a go. If you've got more than one child, give it a go on more than one. It's fascinating. But the key thing to take away from this is a tool. There isn't a right or a wrong, but it helps you understand your children. It helps you see how they react and view the world. And by understanding them more, we can help them in areas where they need a little bit more support. If you found this resource helpful, please do consider making a donation to Standing in the Gap. We are a very small mental health charity based in Oxfordshire, and we are very aware that there's a huge need for good mental health support across the country. So if you found this helpful, please do consider making a donation via our website, do sign up to our newsletter, or do follow us on Facebook. Our Mental Elf is available on Facebook, and you can follow him and keep up to date with the new and exciting things that we're doing.